Hello and welcome to Connect2Share demo for Oracle. In this demo we are showing how the integration between Oracle Enterprise Business Suite and Microsoft SharePoint can help organizations enhance standard business processes so that they are more efficient and more cost effective. We will also show how companies can take advantage of the Connect2Share technology for linking between Oracle and SharePoint and creating a single contiguous system, even though each system is performing a different function. We will illustrate this through the process of creating a new supplier record in Oracle. As you probably know, creating a supplier involves collecting information from several different sources, analyzing that information, followed by a rigorous process of approvals until finally the supplier record can be created and procurement can begin interacting with the supplier for ordering equipment, goods, or services. We start this demo from a supplier portal, which is kind of a marketplace where registered suppliers can submit their invoices, view payment history, update their profile, and even form partnerships with other suppliers. Now, before we begin, let's first take a brief look at how supplier records are managed in Oracle. We will look for suppliers, view their information, and then initiate the creation of a new supplier directly from the Oracle system. So let's go ahead and log into the Oracle eBusiness Suite. I'm entering my username and password, and when I click on the login button, I'm presented with the application homepage, the navigator, which is tailored just for me. It has a wide range of options, and one of them is the Payables Manager. When I click on the Payables Manager, I'm presented with the Payables menu, and this is the place where a qualified user is able to administer or manage all the invoices, payments, and a wide range of setups such as credit cards, employees, and even suppliers. Now, when I'm looking for a supplier, I would click on the inquiry link, and I'm presented with the search page. Now, I can enter a complete supplier name or partial, and then click on the Go button, and the system will go and look for all the suppliers that match the criteria that I've entered. When I click on the Update button, I'm presented with a quick snapshot view of the supplier record that shows all the basic information about the supplier, and on the left side of the screen are all the links for managing different aspects of the supplier record. Let's go ahead and select Company Profile. That's where all the basic information about the supplier is kept. And there are several fields worth noting. For example, supplier type. Look at the long list of supplier types that the system supports. And then business unit is really a custom field or a flex field that we've created for this module where you can associate a supplier to a specific business unit. Let's go ahead and select Long Beach here. And if I scroll down to the bottom of the screen, you will see a section for attachments. This is where you would keep the links to all the documents that are associated with this supplier. So let's close this supplier record. And now, as a procurement manager, I'm interested in looking for a specific supplier that I'd like to do some business with. The name of the supplier is Bluegrass Labs. So when I click on the Go button, you'll see that there are no suppliers with that name. At this point, I can either look for a different supplier or select to request a new supplier. Clicking on this button will launch the new supplier requisition application. This application runs outside of Oracle and will help with collecting the necessary information and approvals in order to qualify new suppliers. This application runs in Microsoft SharePoint, but Connect2Share Technology allows Oracle and the new supplier application to communicate between each other and exchange the necessary information. For example, you can see that we have already received from Oracle the supplier name and the user account. Now, unlike Oracle that contains many different fields, this form only contains the minimum inputs necessary in order to initiate the requisition process. And the form also gives user feedback. For example, if I try to leave out important information and click on the Save button, I get an error. Let's go ahead and populate the form. We'll enter the supplier primary contact, the email address, and then we're going to select the supplier type. Connect2Share enables us to read the list of supplier types in real time from the Oracle eBusiness system. And this is the same list that we saw earlier in the demo when we were in the Oracle screen. Now in the operating unit, we're reading the list of business units from Oracle. In other words, this gives companies the ability to have slightly different labels to fields, even though they're pointing at the same values from the Oracle system. This could be useful across countries and languages and so forth. We'll go ahead and click on the Save button. This will return us to the Oracle system and also initiate the new supplier requisition process. We're now going to switch gears and show you the experience of suppliers that are external to the system and how they interact with the application in SharePoint. Now, the primary contact that we listed earlier in the requisition form will receive an automated email from the program requesting them to join the supplier network. And as you can see, the email lists several different benefits for joining the program. And of course, a qualified person from the home company can modify the body of these types of emails as needed. At this point, I'm going to click on the link that's listed in the message, and this will launch the new supplier application form. This form is used to initiate the application process for adding a new supplier. The process begins with the vendor filling out the form. It is then routed to an internal specialist who decides if the vendor meets the company criteria. And finally, using Connect2Share Technology, the supplier information is then written to the Oracle EBS system. The form has 3 sections or tabs: General Vendor Information, the list of required documents, and the list of contacts for this vendor. At this point, let's go ahead and fill out the application form. We will click on the button and this will populate all the fields in the General Information tab and make a few manual changes. And when we switch over to the Documents tab, we will attach a file to each one of the document tabs that are listed here. Finally, when we click on the file icon, it will open the attached document in the browser and we can examine it without leaving the form. Okay, so now that we've seen the supplier requisition form and the experience of filling out the supplier application form, let's go ahead and submit the application and then switch users and see the experience of a specialist that is tasked at qualifying new suppliers. I'm going to log in to Office 365 as Gary, who's a supplier specialist at our company. And this will take me straight to his inbox. We're waiting for an email from the supplier approval process informing us that a supplier has just completed entering all the necessary information. And once the email has arrived, you can see that I've received it because I'm listed as an approver to the process. And in the body of the email, there are a couple of links. The first one will take me to the application that was just submitted, and the other will take me to an internal SharePoint application for managing the new supplier application process. Let's first take a look at the management portal and then continue with reviewing the supplier form. From this SharePoint portal, we can review all the open requests. We can also see these requests below the portal. We can update the supplier compliance, which is a list of the mandatory documents a supplier must attach to the application, and we saw some of this earlier. We can search for specific supplier documents, and we can also get a lot of unique reports. We're using Excel and the new Microsoft Power BI to blend information from Oracle with information from SharePoint. In this example, we're comparing the total of the purchasing dollars that are spent on suppliers, which is only available in Oracle, and the number of days it took to approve these suppliers, which only exists in SharePoint. We can break down the information by state and even by delivery and quality rating, which are 2 internal-only fields that are maintained by the supplier specialist, and we'll see some of this later. But for now, we wanted to show the capabilities of the system, combining data from multiple sources and presenting them in an easy-to-read form. Let's return to the portal and examine the document compliance section. In SharePoint, a qualified user can control the behavior of forms by simply adding and removing items from a list, and without the need for expensive developers. In this case, we will add a new type of document that a supplier must provide when submitting the application. And once it's added to the list, the change in the form takes place instantaneously. Now, the list of required documents is stored by supplier type and by business unit. This means that a requested supplier may need to provide a different set of documents depending on the designated type and the business unit. Now let's show you the experience of adding a new document type to the list. We'll first provide the name of the document type and then select from the list of supplier types and business units that come directly from the Oracle system. And the document security controls who will have access to the document from the Oracle system, and we'll see that later. Now that we've seen a few of the capabilities of the supplier management portal, like the comprehensive reporting and the managing of the document compliance, let's return to the supplier approval process and review the application that was filed earlier by the vendor. We can either click on the link from the menu or scroll down to below the menu and select to edit the specific application. Now when the form opens, you can see the check mark indicating that the vendor has completed the form. While it is the same form that the supplier filled out, there are several additional internal-only fields. Some of the fields are locked with values provided by the vendor and cannot be changed by the specialist. Others, like the supplier ID, are empty and they are awaiting input from the Oracle system. Now, just as before, I'm able to switch to the Document tab and open documents provided by the vendor directly from the form. At this point, as the specialist, I'll provide ratings for the supplier based on the documents that I read and the research that I've conducted. Once the form is complete, I'm now ready to approve the supplier application. And when I click on the Save button, I'm prompted to create a new supplier record in Oracle. This is where Connect2Share software takes over and triggers the supplier creation workflow in Oracle based on the information from the SharePoint application. Now, after a few seconds of waiting, the system returns with a success or failure message. And when we open the form, you'll notice that a few things with it. First, all the steps are check marked, indicating that they have been completed. And you can also see that we've received the supplier ID from the Oracle system. Finally, you can see that most of the fields on the form are locked and cannot be changed, and this is done for audit trail accuracy. Let's quickly return to where we first started this demo, the supplier inquiry screen in Oracle, and search for the vendor that we've just approved and created using Connect2Share. This time around, when I search for my supplier, the quick view page of the supplier record loads. If we take a look at the Company Profile tab, you'll see that the values of supplier types and business units are populated. And if we scroll to the bottom of the page, you'll see that the three documents that we've attached to the supplier application form were passed to Oracle by Connect2Share. When we click on the link from the Oracle screen, it will open the document that is stored in the SharePoint repository. To wrap up this demo, we'd like to show you two important features, the mobile experience and the document governance, two features that are built into SharePoint and are quite costly to implement with Oracle. Let's start with the mobile view. Here I am in the mobile client of Office 365, logged in as Gary, the specialist. And from the menu, I will select Outlook. And when Outlook loads, you can see the two emails that I have in my inbox. Remember that in the email there were two links. Let's click on the link to open the application form. This is the form that we've just completed in SharePoint. And I can even open the attachments directly from my mobile client. So there's almost no loss of functionality when I access the application from my mobile client. This is the exciting thing here, is that this is built into the SharePoint platform, and so there's very little adaptation needed. Now let's return to the email that we opened earlier and select the second link. And you can see that the menu in SharePoint looks very similar on the mobile client. Finally, let's try and interact with a form. We will attempt to create a new supplier requisition from a mobile client. So from the list of requisitions, I will click on the New Item button. And the form that we saw in the beginning of the demo opens. When I click on the drop-down to select the values of operating unit, I'm presented with the values coming directly from the Oracle system. Connect2Share pulls these values in real time from Oracle, and I can see those on the mobile client. You can see that I have the same experience with the values of supplier type. To wrap up this demo, we wanted to highlight one more feature of the integration between Oracle and SharePoint, and that is document governance. Now, earlier in the demo, we showed how a vendor attaches several documents to the application form. These documents were automatically converted to corporate records, which means that they are now protected documents and adhere to a specific file plan. If you look at the compliance details of these documents, you can see that their status is a record, and at the top part of the dialog, you can see their file plan. What will happen with this document until it is automatically purged from the system? These file plans can, of course, be controlled centrally by a librarian or an administrator. With that, we wanted to thank you for taking the time to watch the Connect2Share demo. We hope you've enjoyed it and can see that this demonstration is really the tip of an iceberg of many other processes that can be unlocked, extended, and collaborated on using Connect2Share. Thank you, and we hope to hear from you soon.